You ever look around and feel like you're surrounded by people who seem incredibly confident, but you can just tell they're deeply insecure? You know, people who are obsessed with success but don't seem to get any real joy out of it? Well, you might just be seeing what the philosopher Slavoj Žižek identified as the defining personality of our era, the pathological narcissist. We're going to do a deep dive into one of his foundational essays to see what it tells us about the world we're all living in right now.
So, our story really kicks off with, well, a bit of a scandal. When the leftist historian Christopher Lasch dropped this quote in his book, The Culture of Narcissism, it was a bombshell. He was basically saying that in the rush to tear down all traditional authority, the left might have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. He wasn't defending old-school patriarchy, not at all. He was diagnosing a brand new social sickness that was growing in its place. And that provocative idea is the launchpad for this whole thing.
All right, here's the game plan. First, we'll look at Lasch's big idea of a narcissistic culture. Then, we're going to put on our lab coats and dissect the anatomy of the narcissist. After that, we'll explore their hidden inner battle, see how this personality basically became the default setting for society, and then we'll end with a pretty surprising twist about what it all means.
Okay, Section 1, Lasch's narcissistic culture. So, Lasch's big point was that the old-school rebel, the person who followed their own internal compass, was gone. And in their place was a totally new kind of conformist, one who looked like anything but.
And here's the kicker. The new conformist isn't the guy in the gray flannel suit, blindly following orders. No, it's the person who makes fun of the old rules, who seems so free and rebellious, but is secretly an absolute slave to what other people think of them. They need that validation, that social applause like oxygen. But Lasch knew this was just what you see on the surface. To really get the internal wiring of this new personality, he had to go deeper. He turned to the work of the psychoanalyst Otto Kernberg.
So, that brings us to Section 2. We're going to zoom in from this wide cultural shot right down to the individual psyche. Let's put this character, the pathological narcissist, or PN, under the microscope. What do they actually look like up close? I mean, just look at this contradiction right at the top. They look down on everyone, yet they're completely dependent on everyone's admiration. It's wild. They can't really enjoy anything for themselves either. Pleasure is only real if it's a performance, if they can see it reflected back in the eyes of an audience. It's not a life. It's a 24/7 stage show where they're the star, producer, and director. So, this outer shell is fascinating, right? But that's all it is, a shell, a facade. It makes you wonder, what kind of engine is running under the hood to produce a personality that's so full of contradictions? What is really going on in there?
And this is where it gets really interesting. According to Kernberg's analysis, that huge ego we see, it's a complete illusion. Structurally, deep down, the narcissist has a profoundly weak ego. They can't handle anxiety, they have terrible impulse control, and because of that, their mind falls back on really primitive, almost childlike defense mechanisms. The big one is called splitting, where you see the world in black and white. People are either all good angels or all bad demons. There's no in between. And when you can't see people as complex, whole beings, well, it's pretty easy to treat them like puppets. Kernberg actually saw this deep fragility as the hallmark of a borderline personality structure.
So that brings us right to the heart of Žižek's argument here in Section 3. The real battle for the narcissist isn't with their boss or their rivals. No, the real fight is with this vicious tyrant living inside their own head. Let's be really clear about this. That charming, super confident exterior is what psychoanalysts call a reactive formation. Basically, you act the complete opposite of how you secretly feel. It's this incredibly elaborate suit of armor that's built to hide a totally chaotic and terrifying inner world. It is not a sign of strength. It's a symptom of deep, deep weakness and fear. Okay, pay attention, because this slide is the absolute key to the whole thing. Psychoanalysis says there are two ways we internalize authority. On the left, you have the healthy way, the ideal of the ego. Think of it as your conscience, your inner compass. It's formed by absorbing the symbolic father's law, not your actual dad, but the idea of a stable, consistent set of rules. It guides you. But the narcissist? They're ruled by what's on the right, the cruel, primitive superego. This thing isn't a guide, it's a tyrant. It doesn't just say, don't do that. It screams, you must succeed, you must enjoy yourself, and then just absolutely hammers you with anxiety and guilt the second you fall short.
So, you see, the narcissist is trapped. A huge part of growing up psychologically is internalizing that stable father's law. But the narcissist fails to do this, so they're stuck in this earlier, more chaotic state, totally at the mercy of this inner tyrant. They never develop a real conscience, just a punishing inner voice that never, ever shuts up.
All right, so how did we get here? How did what sounds like an individual psychological problem become the mandatory personality type you need just to get by in today's world? That's what we're tackling in Section 4.
This timeline really lays it all out. Back in the 19th century, capitalism needed the inner-directed person, guided by their own conscience. That's the ideal of the ego. Then, in the mid-20th century, you get corporate capitalism, which needed the other-directed organization man, who was guided by loyalty to the company. But today, in our so-called permissive late capitalism, it demands a new character, the pathological narcissist, who isn't driven by an inner law at all, but by the relentless external demand of the superego to perform, succeed, and get recognized.
And this is the great paradox of our time. Society got more permissive, right? The old, strict rules of the father figure faded away. But what took their place wasn't freedom. It was something way more oppressive, this irrational, tyrannical demand from the superego, a constant pressure to optimize yourself, to be authentic, to be creative, to succeed, and, this is the really cruel part, to enjoy it all. This command doesn't come from a stable moral code you can live by. It's a chaotic, ever-shifting pressure that just produces constant anxiety.
And that brings us to our final and, most mind-bending section. This is where Zizek takes everything we've just talked about and gives it this incredible twist, offering a really strange, unexpected glimmer of hope. So after all this, you gotta ask, is the narcissist just broken? A failed person who couldn't develop a healthy psyche? The answer is so much more disturbing, and frankly so much more interesting than a simple yes. And there it is, Zizek's most radical claim. The pathological narcissist isn't some freakish outlier. They are the perfectly adapted person for our society. They're psychotic not because they're crazy, but because on a deep structural level, they're missing that inner compass. They have no stable internal law. They just follow the external commands for success. They function perfectly. Often they function better than anyone else, but they are, in a very real sense, hollow. They are the psychotic normal.
So why does this psychotic, normal person thrive? Well, it's because our world is saturated with what Zizek calls the answer without a question. Think about it. We are flooded with gadgets, self-help books, life hacks, new products. All of them are solutions to problems we didn't even know we had. This constant flood of answers is designed to stop us from ever pausing to ask the really big questions. What do I actually want? What's the point of all this?
And this just lays out the two paths so clearly. The pathological narcissist just dives right in. They plunge headfirst into the endless river of answers, and that helps them cover up the fact that there's a big, empty void at the center of it all. But the other figure, the borderline or modern hysteric, does something truly radical. They stop. They look at all these so-called answers, and they ask the classic hysterical question, yeah, but what does it all mean? What do you really want from me? By just asking that question, they expose the whole game, and that is the first step towards a cure.
The psychoanalyst Jacqueline Miller just nails it here. To become a hysteric in this very specific sense is a profound act of rebellion. It means refusing the easy answers the world gives you and turning your entire being into a question that you pose back to the system. It's the moment you stop being a functional psychotic and you start becoming a real person. So, at the end of the day, we're left with this. In a world that is relentlessly giving you solutions, telling you how to be happy, how to be successful, how to be your authentic self, what is the one question that all those answers are designed to make you forget? What is the question that, if you actually dared to ask it, might just set you free?